Nostalgia is such a powerful thing. It can make you love something even if it has its flaws, and even I'm one of its victims. Hello everyone, Alec Elger the SideQuest Gamer here, and I really want to talk about nostalgia for several reasons. One, I look back at my top 10 Mario games list, and now I want Super Mario 64 to switch places with Super Mario Galaxy, because technically, Galaxy perfected the 3D platformer. Two, I've gotten a few negative comments on some of my videos that criticize me for not liking their childhood favorite games as much as they did. Yeah, I actually was called an idiot for saying Bubsy is a flawed game, even though I said it was mediocre and not bad, but I didn't like it as much as that person, so they called me an idiot. And three, I have a few beloved childhood classics that have their flaws that I didn't realize until remembering my first playthrough, as well as flaws I noticed now looking back at them. The power of nostalgia makes you place a certain game as the best in its series, even though there are other entries that improved upon its dominant aspects. Like Zelda Ocarina of Time, for example. As a kid, I played that game over and over, and I really loved it. I used to think that was the best game ever made. Same goes for Spider-Man 2, the game, but now, Ocarina of Time is still a good game, don't get me wrong, but not on my top 3 Zelda games list. And Spider-Man 2 is kind of hard to go back to because it has not aged that well, despite being a cool sandbox game for its time, but then I got a taste of the later sandbox games, and oh boy did they improve upon everything. A really good example is the first Spyro game. Now don't get me wrong, it is a good game in its own right, but compared to its 2 sequels, it feels barren and repetitive. But I've seen many top 10 favorite PS1 games lists include the first game over the other 2. I'm sorry, but Spyro 2 and 3 are just so much better in my opinion. There was more gameplay variety, an actual story that made some sense, and improved level design. Spyro 1 does do one thing better than the other 2, and that would be its form of non-linear progression. But that's really about it. Another good example would be Sonic the Hedgehog. If you played a Sonic game as a kid, you probably loved it and wanted the entire series to play just like the one you played as a kid, and that's why the Sonic fanbase is the way it is. But let me tell you, the original Genesis games are good. The Dreamcast/GameCube era games are good. Colors and Generations are good, but you'd probably dismiss the others unless you sat down and played it as long as you've played your childhood favorite for the first time. Seriously, the problem with most Sonic fans is that they only play the game the first hour or finished it once and don't replay it like they did with their childhood favorite Sonic game. Nostalgia makes you blindly love something, and sadly, companies are starting to cash in on that. Like the new Super Mario Bros. Games. I love the first 2, but because it's familiar with some new level design gimmicks, but nothing too different from the classics, it's like, when I played Super Mario 3D Land, it was just a 3D Mario game that played like the 2D counterparts and really did nothing new in terms of level design. Or Shovel Knight. The internet praised that game because it's basically Mega Man and DuckTales with a Save the Princess story, while even looking almost like an NES game, although I would say it looks more like something on the Sega Master System. Now, Shovel Knight, don't get me wrong, it is an excellent game and probably one of the best indie games of all time. But that's the thing, other than the amazing level design, I didn't play DuckTales or Mega Man until I was like 17 years old, so I really have no nostalgic connection to either of those games, meaning those who did play those games as kids will love this game more than I ever will. And some of you would even say that it catered to nostalgia so much that it lacked its own identity. While I would disagree with that statement, I can see where someone would say that. An even better example would be The Legend of Zelda: A Link Between Worlds. Nintendo clearly made that game to cash in on the love for A Link to the Past while adding a new gimmick to the gameplay, but the playstyle seems to market towards those who loved A Link to the Past, and not just a 2D Zelda in general. It even uses the same light world as A Link to the Past, but the thing about nostalgia that opened my eyes is that it can be acquired in adulthood. Think of it this way, when you played Arkham City 4 years ago and played played it multiple times, you'll likely form new nostalgia for that game in the year of 2021, even if you are an adult from when it was released. And even though I didn't have Super Mario Bros. 3 or Zelda A Link to the Past as a kid, I'll probably have so much nostalgia for them when I'm 26. I'm already replaying those games over and over at the age of 20, but why is that? Well, it always seems that nostalgic connections with games always seem to happen with video games that have lasting appeal. Even though Sonic Adventure 2 has its flaws, it's still a good game, but completionists have a lot of work to do to get an all A rankings on each level, as well as complete the Chao Garden. The more times you spent on a game and the more fun it was to complete that garden, the more fond memories you'll form and likely want to re-experience the thrill of Sonic Speed in the Chao Garden, or just preserve it in your bank of memories. For me anyways, the nostalgia for gamers forms as I try to figure things out that to make the game's world and story all the more important. Like, for example, in A Link to the Past, I'm like a detective in the world trying to find out the backstory of each character and how they affect the dark world and light world and what their contribution to the game is. Like, the thing that makes the fight with Blind the Thief all the more epic was finding out that the main antagonist Ganon was once the king of thieves. And knowing Blind needs to be the leader of a group of thieves, he might have actually been one of Ganon's most trusted lieutenants and probably very good friends before they entered the Dark World, turning into their bestial forms you see in the Dark World. The story never specifies this nor even elaborates about Blind the Thief other than he used to be a thief, as he learned from a brief dialogue spoken by another thief in Kakariko Village. That's what can solidify someone's love for a game, when you theorize little aspects of the game's story, which is why atmospheric games like Super Metroid get all the love they get. Just imagine playing that as a kid, where you play as a bounty hunter with only a story saying, "Find the stolen Metroid." But then you enter Kraid's lair and find a dead metallic creature that the bugs are chowing on. What is that creature? Is it a lab specialist? Space pirate? You just don't know, so you like theorize it, and it just adds to the atmosphere and the mood and the tone of Super Metroid that you just love it even more than you already did. Nostalgia for that game would also form due to its high replay value, and that burning desire to find everything in the game, and if you do 100% it, you'll probably want to do it again and again and again. Sometimes nostalgia can just go beyond the game's current form. Nostalgia can also be cruel to you when you find out that some of the games you played as a kid and loved just are not as good as you remember. When I was a kid, I freaking loved LEGO Island 3 Extreme Stunts for its, at the time, lively semi-LEGO world, but that's all it really is. It's just a bunch of side quests and 5 mediocre at best mini-games that can be a pain to play. Some games you loved as a kid can either be not as good as you remember or they just haven't aged that well. And it's okay to love a game, even if it's terribly flawed, but just don't attack someone on the internet for pointing out the flaws of your beloved childhood classics. So, in conclusion, nostalgia exists in all gamers, and everyone had a different gaming childhood, unless you started gaming when you were like 20. Even if you didn't have a console, you probably played games at a friend's house or on your PC, and formed nostalgia for the games you did have little experience to play. So in conclusion, nostalgia exists in all gamers, whether you realize it or not. But as we grow, sometimes our tastes in games have changed over the years, and even our memories aren't enough to still have the same amount of fun with a game like we did as kids. Or maybe they're better than we remember. That can happen too. But remember, play what you want. These games defined you as a gamer, even if they weren't that great or maybe they were better than you remember. It depends. But that's just my 2 cents on this. Thank you so much for watching, and remember to stay awesome.